Let's examine it more closely and find some unexpected errors that were included in the finished version of this well-loved movie. There are peculiarities even in perfection. 20. Maria has never played the guitar before. Andrews, Julie. Before they began filming, the well-known actress, who played Maria in The Sound of Music, had no prior guitar-playing expertise. She needed to study the fundamentals in order to prepare for her singing and guitar-playing portion. She did, however, find it quite difficult to sing and play the guitar simultaneously. Especially with the cameras rolling, it was too much to bear. She occasionally took a little sip of Austrian schnapps, a potent alcoholic beverage, to help her relax and feel more at ease, before filming some of the guitar sequences. In order to prepare for his role as Captain Von Trapp, Christopher Plummer also studied singing and guitar. However, despite his practice, neither his singing nor his guitar playing were included in the finished film. Rather, they re-recorded certain sections with a professional guitarist and voice, and instead, the movie used their voices. Kim Carruth, number 19, was unable to swim in real life. A terrifying real-life incident occurs when the Von Trapp family is in a rowboat, and it goes over. Kim Carruth, the small child who portrayed the youngest child, Gretel, was not able to swim. Everyone fell into the water when the boat capsized. Gretel was to be safely pulled out of the water by Julie Andrews, who played Maria. However, Julie lost her footing and slid backward when the boat flipped, making it impossible for her to reach Gretel in time. Kim Carruth ended up ingesting a lot of water as a result. Unfortunately, she became ill from it, and ended up throwing up. The actor who portrayed Louisa, one of the elder girls, Heather Menzies, was spot on. Although it was a really frightening time during filming, Kim was fortunately fine afterwards. Number 18. Working on the movie wasn't fun for Christopher Plummer. The actor who played Captain Von Trapp, Christopher Plummer, didn't particularly appreciate working on the music's sound. The film, in his opinion, was excessively romantic or pleasant. As a joke, he even dubbed it, that movie, S&M, or The Sound of Mucus rather than The Sound of Music. He spent a lot of time eating and drinking to deal with his unhappiness throughout filming. As a result, he put on a significant amount of weight during filming. He actually gained so much weight that the costume designers had to alter and adjust his outfits to accommodate his enlarged frame. He later acknowledged that, despite his criticism at the time, he recognized the film's popularity. This is the second unanticipated mishap that was featured in the film. 17. The movie did not use the authentic Von Trapp family home. Although it's not the one shown in the film, the actual home where the Von Trapp family resided is still standing. The big home in the movie is actually a fusion of two different structures. The front was displayed in one, and the back in another. A genuine house was not used for filming the inside sequences. They were filmed on specially designed Hollywood sets. The famous gazebo used for filming the song, 16 Going on 17, was also a fake. It was built specifically for the movie. It had 2 subsequent relocations, and now, fans can view it at Salzburg, Austria's Hellbrunn Palace. Additionally, the movie's depiction of Maria's life as a nun in the courtyard of Nonnberg Abbey was not shot on location. A designer by the name of Boris Levin created a copy that was so realistic-looking, right down to the particular windows and stones, that many people still believe the sequences were filmed there. Finally, the scene in which the Von Trapp family hides from the Nazis in a cemetery was not even shot in Austria. Despite some tour guides in Salzburg still claiming it was filmed there, the entire sequence was recorded on a studio set constructed on the Fox movie lot in Hollywood. 16. Edelweiss was not a classic song in Australia. The song Edelweiss can sound like the national anthem of Austria, or perhaps a traditional folk music from Austria. However, it isn't. In reality, it was written in the US for the Broadway production of The Sound of Music. The well-known songwriting team of Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote all of the show's Austrian-inspired music. The last song they worked on together was Edelweiss. Sadly, Oscar Hammerstein passed away in 1960, barely 9 months after the theater debut of The Sound of Music. Despite not being a true Austrian song, Edelweiss gained so much popularity that many people around the world mistakenly believed it to be a part of Austrian culture or heritage. Maria gave up her rights to the movie on number 15. A German film producer planned to adapt Maria von Trapp's book into a motion picture in 1956. He made her an offer to buy the rights to her narrative for $10,000. Maria asked whether she could have a cut of the movie's earnings as well. The producer, however, told her that it was illegal for film studios in Germany to pay royalties, additional revenue from sales to non-German residents. Maria was already a citizen of the United States at that point. Maria unintentionally gave over all the film rights to her life story when she signed the contract because she trusted him. The producer came back a few weeks later and offered her $9,000 in cash if she agreed right now. For the Von Trapp family, this amount was substantial. She accepted the offer and took the deal because they had never made so much money singing. Maria later learned that she had been duped by the producer. In Germany, there was no such statute. She had been duped by him, and for a small sum of money, took full control of her story. The authors of The Sound of Music, Rogers and Hammerstein, nevertheless gave the Von Trapps a tiny portion of the profits from the play and movie, despite the injustice done to Maria and her family. They did it out of kindness, but they were under no need to. However, it was a small portion of what the Von Trapps could have earned, had they kept the rights. Nevertheless, Maria had no grudges, subsequently stated that the happiness and optimism the play and film offered to people everywhere were far more valuable than any financial gain. Maria was engaged to teach just one child, at number 14. Contrary to the movie's portrayal, Maria von Trapp did not start out as a governess for all 7 children. She was actually brought on board in 1926 to instruct a single child. The daughter of retired Navy Captain Georg von Trapp, also named Maria, gravely afflicted with scarlet fever. It was the same illness that had murdered his wife 4 years before. It was no longer possible for his daughter to walk the 4 kilometers to school. Georg, therefore, traveled to Salzburg's Nonnberg Abbey to get someone to come instruct her at home. They chose Maria Augusta Kucera, a 21-year-old woman, at the abbey. In addition to living at the abbey because of her personal health issues, she had gone to a teacher's college in Vienna. She was only supposed to train the girl for 10 months prior to her formally becoming a nun. But as we all know, things didn't work out that way. Maria stayed for a lot longer. Julie Andrews was cast as Maria in number 13. Julie Andrews was the only actress Ernest Lehman had in mind for the lead part of Maria when he began production on The Sound of Music. She seemed like the ideal candidate for the role. However, director Robert Wise had different ideas when he first joined the team. His top choices were Shirley Jones, a well-known actress best recognized for her parts in musicals, and Grace Kelly, who had retired from playing to become the Princess of Monaco. Robert Wise's discovery of early footage of Julie Andrews's unreleased film Mary Poppins, however, completely altered the plot. He immediately agreed with Lehman that Julie Andrews was the best choice for Maria since he was so enamored with her charisma, voice, and on-screen persona. Despite her enthusiasm in the position, Andrews first hesitated. She didn't want the film to seem overly romantic or unrealistic, as the stage version occasionally did. However, her worries were shared by Wise and Lehman. Their goal was to write a story that seemed more authentic and true. Andrews felt more comfortable as a result, and she chose to take the position. She agreed to a $225,000 deal with 20th Century Fox to star in the movie, which was a substantial sum of money at the time. In the end, Julie Andrews' casting was a great one. Her performance as Maria turned into one of the most beloved roles in movie history, and was crucial in creating the modern classic Sound of Music. 12. Von Trapp was a devoted parent. Compared to his portrayal in the movie The Sound of Music, Captain Georg von Trapp was actually far more caring and affectionate. The portrayal of their father as aloof, severe and frigid was one of the things that displeased the real Von Trapp kids. It's true that he called his children with a whistle, and each one had a distinct sound that let them identify him. Additionally, he outfitted them with identical sailor attire. But unlike in the film, he didn't have them stand in straight lines like soldiers or march around the house. Even if he occasionally seemed a little overburdened by all of his responsibilities, Georg von Trapp was actually a kind and compassionate parent. The stepmother Maria actually needed to learn how to communicate her feelings, according to author Tom Santopietro. She took a while to demonstrate affection and kindness because she had grown up in a very rigid and frigid atmosphere. The youngest child, Johannes von Trapp, once told the BBC that his father was not the rigid military dad portrayed in the film, but rather a very likable man who was open, kind, and generous. He added that his mother, Maria, attempted to alter the captain's portrayal in the movie to make him more like his real personality. Unfortunately, though, she was unable to convince the filmmakers. The story doesn't stop there. See what transpired next. In the film, Father Wozner was substituted at number 11. The Sound of Music movie left out one important character from the true Von Trapp family story. The Von Trapps lost a significant amount of their fortune when their bank failed during the 1930s Great Depression. They started renting out rooms in their large house in order to make ends meet. Father Franz Wozner, a Catholic priest, was one of the tenants. Father Wozner was struck by the family's true musical talent after hearing them sing. Serving as their musical director, he worked with them to improve their vocal abilities. According to Maria von Trapp, he gradually transformed them into a legitimate musical ensemble. Under his tutelage, the family became professional vocalists. Father Wozner even accompanied the Von Trapps on their European and American tours after fleeing Austria with them. He was described by a writer called Tom Santopietro as the Trapp family vocalist's main musical inspiration. He wasn't in the movie though. Rather, they made up a character called Max Detweiler to stand in for the individual who helped them with their music. The filmmakers thought Maria's role would be overshadowed if they showed a priest as their music teacher. Father Wozner was thus left out of the story. Maria was described as peaceful in number 10. In January 1905, Maria Augusta Kucera, later known as Maria von Trapp, was born. She was left an orphan after both of her parents died when she was still a little child. After that, she was transferred to live with an uncle who was reportedly quite violent and vicious. Maria went to a teacher's college when she became older. She gained a deeper understanding of religion there and ultimately became a Catholic. After that, she enrolled in Salzburg's Nunberg Abbey and started her nun training. Maria is presented in The Sound of Music as calm, reserved, and kind. But in practice, she was lively and found it difficult to follow the rigorous convent rules. Maria later admitted that she caused a great deal of trouble at the abbey. She called herself horrible, the worst you can imagine, in an article published in 1980. She broke dishes, talked when she should have remained silent, ran around the courtyard, whistled Gregorian chants which are supposed to be solemn and revered, and even climbed up on the convent's roof. The real Maria was therefore lively and perhaps a touch mischievous, despite the movie's portrayal of her as serene and well-behaved. The 9th, Maria wasn't sure she wanted to wed Captain von Trapp. Actually, Maria wasn't convinced she wanted to wed Captain Georg von Trapp. They were married around a year after she arrived at his home as a governess in the film The Sound of Music. In actuality, however, they were married in 1927, more than 10 years before they departed Austria in 1938. Maria was much younger than Georg. Their relationship didn't start off as a romantic love story, and he was 25 years older. He wanted her to stay as a mother to his children, not only as a governess, because he fell in love with her. She accepted his invitation to remain with him and assumed that responsibility. Maria subsequently stated that she thought George's cautious word choice was aided by God. She believed that she might have refused him if he had simply asked her outright to marry him, because she was in love with him. Maria first chose not to wed him because she genuinely cared for the kids and wanted to support them. She married him. Real affection blossomed between them over time. The filmmakers didn't quite get this detail right, just when you thought you had seen them all. Eighthly, the Trapps did not infiltrate the Mountaineers. Despite leaving Austria the day before the Nazis closed the borders, the Von Trapp family's departure was not as dramatic as it was portrayed in the movie The Sound of Music. In fact, their escape was fairly orderly and quiet, according to official documents and interviews held in the U.S. National Archives. Maria, the Von Trapp's daughter, explained in a 2003 interview with Opera News that contrary to what the film suggests, they did not escape by scaling mountains while carrying bulky instruments and luggage. Rather, they got a train, left during the day, and pretended that they were simply traveling. She stated that they pretended everything was normal so that no one would realize they were fleeing, but they did tell people they were going to America to sing. It was not a solo trip for the family. Their secretary, Martha Zachbauer, and their musical conductor Reverend Franz Wozner, accompanied them. In the movie, Reverend Wozner was changed into Max Detweiler, a fictional figure who remained in Austria. In actuality, though, Wozner remained with the family and helped direct their musical career. They traveled to Italy to begin their adventure. Because Georg von Trapp was born in an area that joined Italy in 1920, he was eligible to receive Italian citizenship. The family traveled to London from Italy before boarding a ship to the United States. The Von Trapps traveled the nation as the Trapp family singers after coming to America in the early 1940s, performing music to make ends meet. They eventually made Stowe, Vermont, their home. They established a well-liked 27-room guest lodge in 1950. The Trapp family lodge has grown into a bigger, more contemporary establishment and is still open today. The Von Trapp family's descendants continue to own and run it. 7th, the Von Trapp family was not as affluent as the film depicted them to be. The Von Trapp family is shown as being extraordinarily affluent in the movie The Sound of Music, living in a beautiful home with lots of staff and no financial problems. But in reality, their situation was very different. The Great Depression was a major global economic crisis that began in the early 1930s. The Von Trapp family was among the many people who lost their savings and jobs. When their bank failed, they lost a significant amount of their wealth, and they were no longer as wealthy as they once were. The family had to fire the majority of their employees since they were unable to maintain their enormous home. They started renting out rooms in their house to guests in order to help pay for expenditures. This was a significant change from their prior lifestyle. In order to supplement their income, the Von Trapps also began to think about singing as a career. As a family, they had always enjoyed singing together. It was a different task, though, to perform in front of an audience. The concept did not sit well with the father, Captain Georg von Trapp. In an interview with the Washington Post in 1978, Eleanor, his daughter, said that seeing her father's family perform nearly caused him pain. He wasn't being elitist, she explained. All he wanted was to protect his kids and keep them private. However, the family needed the money, so they started doing shows at festivals and concerts. Their music was well received by audiences, and they became well known very fast. They even won first place in a significant Austrian music competition in 1936. They performed in other countries, including the US, as a result of this accomplishment, which helped launch their singing career. They would eventually move to America in order to start over and avoid the dangers of World War II. 6th place. In the film, the kids were given incorrect names. Each of the 7 children in the Von Trapp family in the movie The Sound of Music has a distinct name and personality. In actuality, though, they differed in terms of their names, ages, and even the overall number of children. In 1926, Maria, to help with a single child, the actual nun was dispatched from her convent. Maria was also the name of this child. She was Captain Georg von Trapp's second oldest daughter. She suffered from scarlet fever, a deadly disease that had killed her mother 4 years prior. She was still recuperating, so she was unable to attend classes on and off. Therefore, she invited Maria, the governess, to come educate her at home. A lot of folks are taken aback to learn that the lady Georg would finally marry, Maria, was actually the name of one of his daughters. However, none of the kids' real names were mentioned in the movie. To better fit the plot, the filmmakers decided to change all of their names, and even some of their genders. Rupert, Agatha, Maria, Werner, Hedwig, Johanna, and Martina were the genuine Von Trapp children from Georg's first marriage, in order of youngest to eldest. Liesel, a 16-year-old girl who sings the popular song 16 Going on 17, is the eldest child in the film. However, in reality, Rupert was the eldest child, and by the time the family left Austria, he was a man in his late 20s. He was a doctor already. 5th, the Von Trapps were ardent music lovers. Even before Maria came into their lives, the Von Trapp family was passionate about music. They were already a musical family, and singing was a big part of their everyday lives. The family won first place in the Salzburg Music Festival, in both the movie The Sound of Music and The True Story. The movie's depiction of the events, however, is not entirely accurate. Captain Georg von Trapp is portrayed in the movie as a strict man who doesn't allow music in his house. In actuality, he was completely the contrary and strongly supported music. Even before Maria joined the family, he and his first wife loved music and made sure their kids were exposed to it. Fourth, Maria and von Trapp got married sooner than the film showed. The Sound of Music in the film. In 1938, just as the Nazis were beginning to take control of Austria, Maria and Captain Georg von Trapp fell in love and marry. This gives the impression that they are rushing to be together before everything goes wrong, which makes their wedding appear incredibly emotional. That portion of the movie, nevertheless, isn't true to what actually occurred. In actuality, Maria and Georg von Trapp were married on November 26, 1927, a long time ago. That was more than 10 years before Austria was even occupied by the Nazis. Maria was only 22 years old at the time, and Georg was 47, indicating a large age difference. Maria became close to all of the kids over time, and she also became close to Georg. Maria stated in her own writings that she fell deeply in love with Georg at first sight and chose not to marry him. Rather, she wanted to stay with the kids because she loved them. Her feelings for Georg became stronger over time, and they eventually became lifelong partners. The Nazis were not yet a threat when they were married in 1927. Their marriage had nothing to do with politics or war, and Hitler had not seized Austria. Raising the kids and then having 3 more of their own, they started their lives together in harmony. Life in Austria didn't become dangerous until the late 1930s. A long time later, the family's safety was at risk, and Georg von Trapp was adamantly opposed to the Nazis. They decided to leave Austria at that point. However, Maria and Georg had been wed for more than 10 years by that point. They had established a solid, cohesive family. Let's examine one more unexpected error that you may have overlooked. Third, a few of the von Trapp children were left out of the film. The von Trapp family had 7 children in the film The Sound of Music. They are not exactly like the genuine von Trapp children, but each one has a unique name and personality. To make the plot more interesting for the audience, the filmmakers renamed them and made new characters. The real children of Captain Georg von Trapp and his first wife, Agatha Whitehead, served as the model for the 7 kids in the movie. Georg was left a widower with 7 children after Agatha died in 1922. Werner Hedwig, Johanna, Martina, Agatha, Rupert, and Maria Franziska were their true names. Thus, the characters that we see in the film, such as Friedrich, Louisa, Gretel, and Liesel, are not their true names. These names and characters were altered by the producers to better match the plot by incorporating humor, drama, and poignant moments. After marrying in 1927, Georg and Maria had 3 more children. The film doesn't feature any of these kids. They were born in 1929 as Ross Marie, in 1931 as Eleanor, and in 1939 as Johannes. The United States city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is where Johannes was born. The von Trapp family had already fled Austria and sought refuge in America by the time he was born. These 3 younger children were left out of the film, most likely because it was already telling a large story and wanted to keep things straightforward for the sake of time and narrative. It's possible that adding more kids would have made the film too lengthy or complex. Therefore, although there are only 7 children in The Sound of Music, the true von Trapp family had 10. 3 more with Maria and 7 from Georg's first marriage. Secondly, Christopher Plummer expressed no desire to serve as captain. It was quite difficult to cast Captain von Trapp in The Sound of Music. It was much simpler to find someone to play Maria. A number of well-known performers, including Richard Burton, Yul Brynner, Sean Connery, and Bing Crosby, were considered for the captain's part. Robert Wise, the film's director, was adamant about using Christopher Plummer for the role. He was greatly pleased by Plummer's abilities after seeing his Broadway performances. Christopher Plummer, meanwhile, was initially uninterested in the position. He rejected it several times. He thought the character might not fit him and didn't like the way it was written. Robert Wise eventually made the long journey to London to have a face-to-face meeting with him. Wise discussed his ideas for the movie and his preferred portrayal of the captain during their meeting. Additionally, he gave Plummer the assurance that he could work with the screenwriter to improve and enliven the character. Plummer ultimately made the decision to accept the position after taking all of this into account. In June 1960, 20th Century Fox paid $1,025,000 to purchase the rights to use the music as the soundtrack for a movie. In 2016, that sum would have been roughly $10,100,000. Additionally, they decided to give 10% of the movie's earnings to the original authors. First, before The Sound of Music saved the day, 20th Century Fox was on the verge of going bankrupt. The film studio, 20th Century Fox, was having severe financial problems in the early 1960s. They had spent a great deal of money on the movie Cleopatra. At first, it was only expected to cost $2 million. However, a number of production-related issues caused the budget to soar to more than $44 million. Even though Cleopatra did earn some money at the box office, the enormous costs were far greater than the earnings. The studio was close to going out of business. Then came The Sound of Music. At first, Fox wasn't sure how well the movie would do. They feared that audiences wouldn't be interested in musicals, which had somewhat lost their appeal. Nevertheless, The Sound of Music was a huge hit when it debuted in 1965. The plot, the beautiful music, and Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer's outstanding performances were all adored by the audience. The movie became the highest-grossing film of 1965 because of its positive reception. However, it didn't stop there. It surpassed Gone with the Wind, which had held the record for 24 years, to become the highest-grossing movie of all time by November 1966. The Sound of Music's phenomenal success prevented 20th Century Fox from going bankrupt. The studio was able to recover and stay solvent because of the money it made. In addition to becoming a renowned classic, this heartwarming movie saved a whole film company from certain death. Please click the next video that appears on your screen, like this one, and subscribe if you liked it.